Welcome to Face Towards Zion. For the week of January 4th through the 10th, the Come Follow Me curricula discusses the first 26 verses in Joseph Smith history. This is really the first vision. I guess a photo of the sacred grove would be more appropriate, but I recently came across this painting by Arnold Freeberg. It is different than other paintings of the first vision, and I really liked it, so I decided to use it. I like how it's all washed out. To me, the glory is there, and you can vaguely see the Father and the Son in their glory. To me, this is my favorite painting of the first vision, even though later on you will see that I think this is also very limited. Joseph Smith history, the first 26 verses, the first vision. There are really two events that define Joseph Smith and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints: the first vision and the Book of Mormon. We just spent a year studying the Book of Mormon, its teachings and its testimony, but the book is real. You can see it and you can feel it. It was first published in 1830, that is a matter of fact. Now, it can be disputed about where it came from. Was it truly a translation of gold plates found in upstate New York, or was it all a fraud somehow? That is really the question. The first vision is different. There is no physical evidence. You about have to take one person's word for it. The Book of Mormon at least had the 3 and the 8 witnesses. The first vision only has Joseph Smith standing alone. We each have to decide, was it real? Was it made up? Really, the question is, who was Joseph Smith? Was he a smooth charlatan trying to make a name for himself, or was he a prophet of God? Did he make things up, or did he get caught up in a series of events that he didn't always control? Was he devious, or was he just trying to do his best? The only way to know for yourself is to study it and then take it to the Lord. Many study it, not all take it to the Lord. You cannot get a physical witness. You can get a spiritual witness. I hope that in this video I can show some of the events that shaped Joseph Smith. He reacted in certain ways. Understanding why he reacted certain ways can give you insights into who he really was. The first vision opened the heavens in this dispensation. This dispensation will close with the building of Zion and the ushering in of the second coming. That is the purpose of this dispensation. The first vision was the event that began all of this. While we reverence and believe in the first vision, I don't know if we truly understand how incredible of an event this was. I think we spend too much time arguing for its reality, that it really occurred. I think time would be better spent understanding the vision of itself. That being said, there is only a limited amount to study. Joseph himself only left 4 accounts of what happened. These accounts were spread out over a 10-year period. The first, written, was composed 12 years after the event itself. There's something to be said about how we perceive things. I would like to give 2 examples. The first example is something that occurred while I was in high school, and that was a number of years ago. When I was a junior, I was in a history class. The teacher came to me and asked me to help him teach the lesson. As he was going to start showing how we perceive things, he said he would walk to the board and write perception. As he started to write this word, he asked me to jump up from my chair, run twice around a table that was sitting in front of the class, and say something to the effect of, "The British are coming, the British are coming, and I don't know the score of last Friday's game," and then run out of the class. He asked me to go to the library, where he had arranged with the librarian that I was to hang out until someone else from the class came and got me. Once this happened, he asked the class a number of questions. Who was it? Most of the class got that right, but then he asked, what did I say? How many times did I run around the table? What was I wearing, etc.? At first, everyone just wrote down their answers and they turned those in. Then they started discussing it. His point was that 1, everyone was in the room, and 2, everyone saw and heard the exact same thing. But when they started to compare notes, it was amazing how kids remembered those events differently, even when they were all there and it only happened minutes ago. They would argue about what I said. Some said that I gave the score of the game, others that I asked about a football game, while others said it was a different sport, and few agreed on what I was wearing. Many different answers were given, even though all were there and all saw and heard the same thing. The second example is with genealogy. Have you ever done very much genealogy? Has your research ever found conflicting information? For example, have you ever read a history of someone and they give you the death date, and then you find out that that death date is different from the death certificate, and both of those dates are different from what is on the headstone. Yet, all of those were first-hand witnesses. Can I give you a personal story? Our first child passed away of sudden infant death syndrome. Before he passed away, we had an episode where we had to take him to the hospital. He was in severe condition, and the doctors needed to insert IVs. His vessels had constricted, so this was very difficult. They tried his hands, and it didn't work out. Out of desperation, they shaved his head and tried to insert an IV into the vessels of his head. Again, it didn't work, and they had to keep shaving him until they were able to insert this IV. A number of years after this event, I wrote about this story. In the story, I mentioned about how we had to shave his head 3 times. My wife read the story and said she liked the story, but pointed out to me that they actually had to shave him 4 times. I corrected her. No, it was 3 times. She corrected me. No, it was 4 times. I let her know that I was there, and I clearly remembered that we shaved him 3 times. She also indicated that she was there and that it was 4 times. Well, in this example, as it worked out, we had some pictures of him. I reviewed the pictures, and guess what? He was shaved 4 times. I was clearly there. This was a very emotional time for me, and I clearly remembered it wrong. I was writing only 5 years after the event. So, if you have much experience at all with family history or remembering things, you can see how easy it is to get things messed up, even if you were there. Joseph Smith only left 4 first-person accounts of the first vision. These are all in the Gospel Library app. From the home page, select Restoration and Church History, then select First Vision. After the title page and the introduction are the 4 accounts. They are circa summer 1832 history, journal 9 through 11th November 1836, circa 1838 history, and church history 1 March 1842, or the Wentworth Letter. Each of these were given under different circumstances. Before delving into these 4 accounts, I would like to discuss 3 things that happened to Joseph that impacted these accounts and who he was. The first thing I'd like to talk about occurs in the 1838 version that is currently in our Pearl of Great Price. Verse 20 says, "He again forbade me to join with any of them, and many other things did he say unto me, which I cannot write at this time. When I came to myself again, I found myself lying on my back, looking up into heaven. When the light had departed, I had no strength, but soon recovering in some degree, I went home. And as I leaned up to the fireplace, Mother inquired what the matter was. I replied, 'Never mind, all is well. I am well enough off.' I then said to my mother, 'I have learned for myself that Presbyterianism is not true.' It seems as though the adversary was aware at a very early period of my life that I was destined to prove a disturber and an annoyer of his kingdom. Why else should the power of darkness combine against me? Why the opposition and persecution that arose against me almost in my infancy?" Now there is quite a bit in this verse. Among them, many other things did he say unto me, which I cannot write at this time. Also, he appeared to be taken away from the grove, but I wanted here to discuss the interaction he had with his mother. Let's set the stage. Joseph was truly concerned about his salvation and where to turn. He had an incredible example of his mother. She really wanted badly to do what was right. She just didn't know where to turn. She set the example by searching for a church and often going out into the woods to pray. Joseph knew this. Finally, he decided to follow her example. He went into the woods and had this incredible experience. Afterwards, he has a conversation with his mother, who is his example. Joseph had just had an incredible experience. We will talk about it more in a minute. It wasn't just that the father and the son showed up and they had a 3-minute conversation. It was more than that. Joseph has an incredible experience, and his mother can tell something is different. Using her mother's intuition, she inquires of Joseph, what is the matter? Joseph just had this incredible experience, and what does he tell her? That he has learned for himself that Presbyterianism is not true. Aren't you at least a little disappointed? That is all he told his mother. That is probably 0.00001% of what he had learned. Yes, that may have been the topic of the past few days, but doesn't this tell us something? That Joseph was playing his cards very close to his vest. Perhaps he was even counseled in the vision to be careful of who he communicated this information. But we see that Joseph is one who is often hesitant to share information. Watch as we go throughout this year. You will see this happen fairly often. Joseph didn't tell us the whole story. When he did communicate, it would often be with as little information as he could give. Another event that impacted Joseph significantly is told in the next couple of verses. Some few days after I had this vision, I happened to be in company with one of the Methodist preachers, who was very active in the before-mentioned religious excitement, and conversing with him on the subject of religion, I took occasion to give him an account of the vision which I had had. I was greatly surprised at his behavior. He treated my communication not only lightly, but with great contempt, saying it was all of the devil and there were no such things as visions or revelations in these days, that all such things had ceased with the apostles, and that there would never be any more of them. I soon found, however, that my telling the story had excited a great deal of prejudice against me among professors of religion, and was the cause of great persecution, which continued to increase. And though I was an obscure boy, only between 14 and 15 years of age, and my circumstances in life such as to make a boy of no consequence in the world, yet men of high standing would take note sufficient to excite the public mind against me and create a bitter persecution. And this was common among all the sects, all united to persecute me. So he finally did communicate a little to a trusted minister. This was probably an individual that had impacted Joseph and much of his thoughts. Much of his thoughts may have been influenced by this minister. The fact that he told the minister was very significant in and of itself. But when he did share a little information, he was flatly rejected. I think this rejection hurt Joseph. When he did share information later on, he would remember this hurt, and he would be very careful. Again, the critics of Joseph Smith often point out any discrepancies between the different accounts of the first vision. In a book titled The First Vision, Memory and Mormon Origins, Stephen C. Harper points out that Joseph had a bitter taste in his mouth from this interaction. Joseph's 1832 account reflected this and tried to smooth things over with the Methodists. But after the persecution in New York, Kirtland, and Missouri, by the time Joseph gave the 1838 account, he was beyond that and now was telling it more like it was. See Stephen Harper's writings for a more in-depth analysis on this point. The third story I would like to share that I think impacted Joseph is not told in any of the accounts of the first vision, but is shared by Joseph Smith's mother in his book, History of Joseph Smith by his mother, Lucy Mack Smith. This is a book that I would highly recommend. This is an eyewitness account that shares a lot of details on Joseph's life. This event happened a few years later and was in fact after Alvin had died. Let me read what his mother first said, and this will lead into what is said on the slide. Shortly after the death of Alvin, a man commenced laboring in the neighborhood to effect a union of the different churches in order that all might be agreed, and thus worship God with one heart and with one mind. This seemed about right to me, and I felt much inclined to join in with them. In fact, the most of the family appeared quite disposed to unite with their numbers. But Joseph from the first utterly refused even to attend their meetings, saying, "Mother, I do not wish to prevent your going to meeting, or any of the rest of the families, or your joining any church you please, but do not ask me to join them. I can take my Bible and go into the woods and learn more in 2 hours than you can learn at meeting in 2 years, if you should go all the time." To gratify me, my husband attended some 2 or 3 meetings, but peremptorily refused going any more, either from my gratification or any other person's. During this excitement, Joseph would say, it would do us no injury to join them, that if we did, we should not continue with them long, for we were mistaken in them, and did not know the wickedness of their hearts. One day he said that he would give us an example, and that we might set it down as a prophecy. And here it is. You look at Deacon Jessup, he said, and you hear him talk very piously. Well, you think he is a very good man. Now suppose that one of his poor neighbors should owe him the value of a cow, and that this poor man had 8 little children. Moreover, that he should be taken sick and die, leaving his wife with 1 cow, but destitute of every other means of supporting herself and family. Now I tell you that Deacon Jessup, religious as he is, would not scruple to take the last cow from the poor widow and orphans in order to secure the debt, notwithstanding he himself has an abundance of everything. Joseph sometimes was very much like his father. For them, being a pious person has little to do with whether or which church you attend, but it does have to do with how you treat other people. Later we will see Joseph live this principle. There will be times, some just a few years away, where people in need would come to Joseph, and Joseph would be willing to give the shirt off his back to help them. When we get to Kirtland, there will be people who will have needs. Joseph will help them, and sometimes this will come back to bite him. He will try to build this Zion society, and many will take advantage of Joseph. Others will then judge him and say that a prophet should have known what would happen, and Joseph should have known this. Many will leave the church over this. But Joseph was just trying to do his best, which really leads us to the million-dollar question, or the elephant in the room. When it comes to Joseph Smith, there may be some who really are not familiar with him. Everyone else usually has an opinion, and usually it's a pretty strong opinion. To many he is just an opportunist or a conniving hypocrite that tried to feed his ego and lusts on unsuspecting prey. Or to many others he was a prophet of God, an individual like Moses or Isaiah, Adam or Peter. While there are some in the middle between these positions, generally it is on one side or the other. As I have studied the life of Joseph, I see little things here and there that lead me to believe that he truly was a sincere person. He tried his very best. This whole series of events started when he was very young. He didn't have the experience to know what others would do. You have to remember, he didn't know how this was going to end. He lived his life one day at a time. Do you know how your story is going to end? What will happen if the United States and the world gets caught up in forces that we don't currently understand? Look at how the lives of others was changed. Think of an average person living in England during the early 19th century. What would they have thought if you would have told them that a religion would come to their doorstep, and that they would leave their beloved homeland and push a handcart to Salt Lake City? Yet this happened to thousands. If you don't know how your story will end, guess what? Neither did Joseph. All he knew was he got caught up in this incredible work. He knew it was from God, so he did his very best, and he tried to treat everyone with love. Many would take advantage of him and try to take his entire world. Others would help him and give him all that they had. Many would abandon him. Others would follow him and give their entire lives to his cause. This all started with the first vision. Let's look at it a bit deeper and see what we can learn. Note that in this discussion I will not be looking at answering the question whether it's true or false. I think it's time to move beyond that. The real question is, what can we learn from this event? I would like to begin with reading a portion of the 1835 account. I kneeled again. My mouth was opened and my tongue liberated, and I called upon the Lord in mighty prayer. A pillar of fire appeared above my head. It presently rested down upon me and filled me with joy unspeakable. A personage appeared in the midst of this pillar of flame, which was spread all around, and yet nothing consumed. Let me give another account. This is not a first-person account, but this is Orson Pratt, who in 1840 published a pamphlet titled An Interesting Account of Several Remarkable Visions and of the Late Discovery of Ancient American Records. This is the first published account of the first vision. Clearly, Orson Pratt, a member of the Quorum of the 12, had received much of this information from Joseph himself. The pamphlet says, He at length saw a very bright and glorious light in the heavens above, which at first seemed to be at a considerable distance. He continued praying while the light appeared to be gradually descending towards him, and as it drew nearer, it increased in brightness and magnitude, so that by the time that it reached the tops of the trees, the whole wilderness, for some distance around, was illuminated in a most glorious and brilliant manner. He expected to have seen the leaves and boughs of the trees consumed as soon as the light came in contact with them. But perceiving that it did not produce that effect, he was encouraged with the hopes of being able to endure its presence. It continued descending slowly until it rested upon the earth, and he was enveloped in the midst of it. When he first came upon when it first came upon him, it produced a peculiar sensation throughout his whole system, and immediately his mind was caught away from the natural objects with which he was surrounded. One more quote, and then we will discuss. This is from the 1838 Pearl of Great Price, verse 20, which we have already discussed. This is just a portion of the verse. He again forbade me to join with any of them, and many other things did he say unto me, which I cannot write at this time. When I came to myself again, I found myself lying on my back, looking up into heaven. When the light had departed, I had no strength, but soon recovering in some degree, I went home. So what happened? The vision begins in the grove of trees. A pillar of fire comes down from heaven. That was Joseph's exact words, a pillar of fire. Now compare this to Lehi's experience. This is in Nephi's words. And it came to pass, as he prayed unto the Lord, there came a pillar of fire, and dwelt upon a rock before him, and he saw and heard much. And because of the things which he saw and heard, he did quake and tremble exceedingly. And it came to pass that he returned to his own house at Jerusalem. And he cast himself upon his bed, being overcome with the Spirit and the things which he had seen. And being thus overcome with the Spirit, he was carried away in a vision, even that he saw the heavens opened. And he thought he saw God sitting upon his throne, surrounded with numberless concourses of angels in the attitude of singing and praising their God. Do you notice the similarities? It begins with a pillar of fire. This pillar of fire is often referred to as the Shekinah, the presence of the Lord. Lehi's vision was in two parts, but it's the same. Lehi was carried up to the heavens and to the council of the gods. He saw God on his throne and numberless concourses of angels. In the 1835 account, Joseph said, "And I saw many angels in this vision." Lehi's vision began on earth, but then Lehi was lifted up to heaven. So Joseph's vision started in the grove, but he also seems to be taken to heaven. Did he see the throne room? We don't know. Joseph, because of his inclination to keep things close to his vest, never tells us this part. But what does all this mean? 1 Nephi 13:37. And blessed are they who shall seek to bring forth my Zion at that day, for they shall have the gift and the power of the Holy Ghost. And if they endure to the end, they shall be lifted up at the last day, and they shall be saved in the everlasting kingdom of the Lamb. And whoso shall publish peace, yea, tidings of great joy, how beautiful upon the mountains shall they be. So to be lifted up means to be exalted. As Joseph was lifted up, he received the blessings necessary for him to continue his work. The Pearl of Great Price account says, "And many other things did he say unto me, which I cannot write at this time." I think our stereotype of the first vision is to see a painting similar to the one on the first page of this presentation of Joseph sitting in the grove and two personages in the air talking with him. I don't know if that is how it really happened. If he was truly lifted up, then perhaps his vision is more like the Circle of Angels painting of Dante's Paradise by Gustave Doré. But still, I don't think this gives us what it really was. In the first visions, Joseph didn't just learn that Presbyterianism is not true. Yes, he did learn that, but he learned so much more. It took time for him to fully process this vision. He didn't know how to translate into words or apply it. Later in Nauvoo, Joseph will implement the endowment. I don't think that the concept of the endowment came to Joseph in Nauvoo. I believe it started in the sacred grove. There Joseph learned who he was and who God was. Yes, he still didn't know about the Book of Mormon. That was to come. That was the means. The first vision was the ends. So what did the first vision do for Joseph? For one, what was he after? While I was laboring under the extreme difficulties caused by the contests of these parties of religionists, I was one day reading the Epistle of James, 1st chapter and 5th verse, which reads, "If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, that giveth to all men liberally and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him." Never did any passage of Scripture come with more power to the heart of man than this did at this time to mine. It seemed to enter with great force into every feeling of my heart. I reflected on it again and again, knowing that if any person needed wisdom from God, I did. For how to act I did not know, and unless I could get more wisdom than I then had, I would never know. For the teachers of religion and the different sects understood the same passages of Scripture so differently as to destroy all confidence in settling the question by an appeal to the Bible. At length I came to the conclusion that I must either remain in darkness and confusion, or else I must do as James directs, that is, ask of God. I at length came to the determination to ask of God, concluding that if he gave wisdom to them that lacked wisdom, and would give liberally and not upbraid, I might venture. Ultimately, Joseph went into the grove seeking wisdom. Wisdom is what Solomon wanted. Wisdom is more than knowledge. Wisdom is a divine attribute. That day in the grove, Joseph was blessed with wisdom. He now knew how to obtain God's help. He learned of who he was. He learned the gospel. And this is the gospel which I have given unto you, that I came into the world to do the will of my Father, because my Father sent me. And my Father sent me that I might be lifted up upon the cross. And after that I had been lifted up upon the cross, that I might draw all men unto me, that as I have been lifted up by men, even so should men be lifted up by the Father. As Joseph was lifted up in the first vision, the purpose of the gospel is for the Lord to lift all of us up. Yes, lift us up when we are down, but even more, to lift us up to heaven that we may live as he lives. This is what the first vision can teach us. The first vision is not an introduction to the gospel, but it is the gospel itself. That we can go through the same process Joseph went through. We are to gain divine attributes, wisdom being among them. And then we are to be lifted up, to live with God again. This is the gospel. This is the first vision. Sometime in the second year after our removal to Manchester, there was in the place where we lived an unusual excitement on the subject of religion. Indeed, the whole district of country seemed affected by it, and great multitudes united themselves to the different religious parties, which created no small stir and division amongst the people, some crying low here and others low there. For notwithstanding the great love which the converts to these different faiths expressed at the time of their conversion, and the great zeal manifested by the respective clergy, who were active in getting up and promoting this extraordinary scene of religious feeling in order to have everybody converted, as they were pleased to call it, let them join what sect they pleased. Yet, when the converts began to file off, some to one party and some to another, it was seen that the seemingly good feelings of both the priests and the converts were more pretended than real. For a scene of great confusion and bad feelings ensued, priest contending against priest and convert against convert, so that all their good feelings one for another, if they ever had any, were entirely lost in a strife of words and a contest about opinions. During this time of great excitement, my mind was called up to serious reflection and great uneasiness. But though my feelings were deep and often poignant, still I kept myself aloof from all these parties, though I attended their several meetings as often as occasion would permit. My mind at times was greatly excited. The cry and tumult were so great and incessant. In the midst of this war of words and tumult of opinions, I often said to myself, what is to be done? Who of all these parties are right, or are they all wrong together? If any one of them be right, which is it, and how shall I know it? While I was laboring under the extreme difficulties caused by the contest of these parties of religionists, I was one day reading the Epistle of James, 1st chapter and 5th verse, which reads, If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, that giveth to all men liberally and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him. Never did any passage of Scripture come with more power to the heart of man than this did at this time to mine. It seemed to enter with great force into every feeling of my heart. I reflected on it again and again, knowing that if any person needed wisdom from God, I did. For how to act I did not know, and unless I could get more wisdom than I then had, I would never know. For the teachers of religion and of the different sects understood the same passages of Scripture so differently as to destroy all confidence in settling the question by an appeal to the Bible. At length I came to the conclusion that I must either remain in darkness and confusion, or else I must do as James directs, that is, ask of God. I at length came to the determination to ask of God, knowing that if he gave wisdom to them that lacked wisdom, and would give liberally, and not upbraid, I might venture. So in accordance with this, my determination to ask of God, I retired to the woods to make the attempt. It was on the morning of a beautiful clear day, early in the spring of 1820. It was the first time in my life that I had made such an attempt, for amidst all my anxieties, I had never as yet made the attempt to pray vocally. After I had retired to the place where I had previously designed to go, having looked around me and finding myself alone, I kneeled down and began to offer up the desires of my heart to God. I had scarcely done so when immediately I was seized upon by some power which entirely overcame me, and had such an astonishing influence over me as to bind my tongue, so that I could not speak. Thick darkness gathered around me, and it seemed to me for a time as if I were doomed to sudden destruction. But, exerting all my powers to call upon God to deliver me out of the power of this enemy which had seized upon me, and at the very moment when I was ready to sink into despair and abandon myself to destruction, not to an imaginary ruin, but to the power of some actual being from the unseen world, who had such marvelous power as I had never before felt in any being. Just at this moment of great alarm, I saw a pillar of light exactly over my head, above the brightness of the sun, which descended gradually until it fell upon me. It no sooner appeared than I found myself delivered from the enemy which held me bound. When the light rested upon me, I saw two personages, whose brightness and glory defy all description, standing above me in the air. One of them spake unto me, calling me by name, and said, pointing to the other, This is my beloved Son, hear him.